Hello, this is Chobe, the Shiny Colors Discord. Welcome back to another episode of the Shiny Review. Today we've got 3 cards out of the 4 of this update to talk about. A new Produce SSR for Sakuya, as well as support SSRs for Tenka and Meguru. Couple things before we get started. First, the Kiriko. I think she's okay. She has a good gold passive, but she's a little clunky, I think, for most people to be able to use. Her masteries are rough, to say the least. Like, they're fine, but they're not exactly that compelling. So I wasn't, too interested to talk about that support. But she's, again, okay-ish. If you're able to use a lot of attention down or do that already, good pick. And as always, Sakuya and Tenka are limited. They will be coming back around eventually, years from now. But they'll be back at some point. If you want them now, in order to improve upon your dance teams, this is your only time to really get them in a timely fashion, outside of paid-only banners. With that, let's go ahead and get started. First off, we have Sakuya. Sakuya's newest SSR is a focused dance unit, taking a lot of concepts from Antika and slamming them all together. From an outside perspective, she's a powerful unit with AoE appeals and a currently unique passive type that can drastically change the game depending on how they take it. In reality, Sakuya is a unit that doesn't particularly advance Dance Antika in a way that feels conducive to anything. She's at odds with many of their newer cards, which is a huge detriment. This isn't to say that Sakuya is a bad card by any means, but it feels so mixed in the current moment. She does so much for herself at the cost of making things worse for her other recent Dance Antika members. On the other hand, Sakuya has snuck the ability of Interest Ignore onto her final passive. While the requirements are fairly strict, the payoff is huge and has some potentially dangerous ramifications for future limited cards going forward. Her roles are center, maybe center. She has a good center value, so no question mark this time, but it does depend on if you think you want her for the memory appeal, which is good, or her good appeals. She can attack all, she has a conditional Interest Ignore, she's a buffer, and she has some revenge aspects to her. I moderately recommend pulling for Sakuya. I wouldn't put her on the super high recommendation, or even high recommendation, just because it's investing into a team that is still struggling to really have a good, cohesive identity. So while the card itself is good, the baggage that comes with it drags it down a little bit. Sakuya's initial skill is a Dance 2.5 appeal to all judges that reduces your current mental by 20%, then raises your dance by upwards of 120% for 3 turns based on how much of a mental reduction you actually took from said appeal. Her plus appeal, keeping the Antika tradition so far, requires all of the Antika members as well as your mental to be 75% or higher. This grants a Dance 50% buff for 3 turns. The max version of this skill is a Dance 4.0 appeal to all judges, reduces your mental by 25%, and raises your dance upwards of 180% for 3 turns based on how much mental you lost from this appeal. The plus appeal, which requires all of Antika and your mental to be 49% or lower, is a Dance 1.0 appeal to all judges. Her memory appeal, once maxed out, is a Dance 3.0 max appeal based on how low your current mental is, and links into a Dance maximum 3.5 appeal based on how low your attention is. For the passives, her 1-star passive is a Dance 50% up that just requires Sakuya on your team, and it has a 30% chance to activate 3 times. Her 2-star passive is a Dance 75% up that requires the turn count to be 2 or earlier, which has a 30% chance to activate twice, and also unlocks a Dance plus 50 uncap. Her 3-star uncap is a Dance plus 150, and her 4-star passive is a Dance 120% up that also applies Ignore Interest for the rest of the turn, that requires your max mental to be over 4,500 and the turn count to be 2 or later, which has a 20% chance to activate 3 times. This will also unlock a Dance mental plus 100 uncap. For the support recommendations, Daikichi Kogane of course being the MVP, having more or less everything you would want out of a dance support, especially for Antika. As for your other dance supports, Dance Antika have a couple routes they can take realistically. Kiriko alongside Mamimi are basically your strongest passives, and you're going to have to use cards like Yuika in order to get those passives online, in conjunction with the appeals that you're using from Kogane 6 as well as Sakuya 7. Now, if you don't have some of those pieces or you need some additional filler, cards like Natsuha are good for stamina as well as SP generation, while Asahi and Fuyuko do the same things together. So it all kind of depends on the pool you currently have and what supports you think will work the best in your circumstance. That being said, most of the Antika stuff is where your big damage comes in outside of one particular situation, which is in a hilarious turn of events, this particular combination of Chiyuki and Tenka. It's meant to be as an alternative to Kiriko, as Tenka's crazy strong gold passive can be activated by simply having these two activate all their passives early as soon as possible. Since Tenka's gold passive requires 5 or more heal instances throughout the performance, you can use Chiyuki and Tenka's passives, which can heal you for very small amounts, and hopefully have enough of them activate within the first couple turns to make a very strong appeal going forward. It's good if you don't have the setup that allows you to really reduce your mental rapidly, especially if you're missing out on cards like Kogane 6. For the team recommendation, we have Kogane 6, Kiriko 5, Sakuya 7 as the center, Yuika 3 in our dance position, and Mamimi 5. This is the variation of the build that attempts to revolve around Sakuya 7 as both your center as well as your baseline for max mental of 4500 or higher. The intention is to primarily set up for Yuika ideally, while stalling for time with Daikichi Kogane appeals or attempting to reduce your own mental with things like Kokoro Mine, in other words the Yuika support we saw earlier, or cards like Kogane and Sakuya as early turn options, or even Mamimi 5. If you're opting for the Alstroemeria package, you can forego low mental passives and focus on anything that can get you a more consistent turn 4 or turn 5 clear. One point to this team is Sakuya as center still has decent damage before the Link appeal, and is a good backup if you know you'll fail to Link in time before the fest is over. Another point is that Sakuya's plus of heals, especially her 4-star version, is the main payoff to 4500 mental, and when used early, allows a fairly clean rotations of appeals to end on Yuika, who is your finisher. Lastly, the team's rotation can be kinda strict. You really do need to find Kogane's 4-star appeal in your opener, otherwise you have to fall back on Daikichi options, which can just slow things down, and the whole plan might just fall apart without having any particular opener like a Daikichi or a Kogane 6 appeal. Ideally, you look for Kogane on your first turn, following up with Sakuya, so that you have 2 instances of mental health reduction. Then you're setting up one last time with Mamimi, and hopefully ending things off with Yuika on turn 4 or turn 5. The other version of the build you can try flips around the positions of Yuika and Sakuya. This allows you to build way less health because you focus less on Sakuya's passives and focus more on allowing Yuika to be as strong as possible as your center. It's probably a little better, but it's hard to say right now given that we've had very little test time with the new Sakuya. But both builds seem fairly valid even if both of the teams are still kind of struggling at this point in time. Now onto the grades. As a center, Sakuya gets pretty good ones, an S+ to a double S-. It took me writing it down to realize that she has the exact same values as Tenka 7, which is why the scores more or less carry over. The value of this card as a center is very good. If you've been looking for a Dance Antika center and lack many of their older options, then this Sakuya is a great pickup for this specifically. She has merit of using her appeals even as a center, which is a nice change of pace, and allows you to set up some pretty decent turns through her appeal anyway. As a unit, A- to S+. As mentioned before, Sakuya is strong for most merits, but is kind of a weird card for Antika at this point in time. She can run into issues with not equal Yuika, so she's a great alternative for either center or dance position if you lack Yuika. Otherwise, you have to make interesting compromises like the team builds we were talking about earlier in order to make both of them particularly work, which, depending on how you feel, is just trying to force one of them to work over the other. The AoE will carry you for sure early, and optimization may get difficult later. Be very mindful of your cards if you intend to invest a lot of Hazuki into this Sakuya, because there's a lot of upkeep in terms of the other cards you need in order to really make this card flourish. Next up we have Tenka. Not to be left behind in terms of quality cards anytime soon, we have another Tenka Limited who on paper seems incredibly strong. She's a dance support with access to a whopping 130% dance buff on her 2-star passive, as long as you're able to heal 5 different times throughout a performance. Her masteries focus on a lot of SP, but very little on stamina, which can be a huge detriment to step teams if you choose not to run her alongside the Dance Chiyuki support from a little while back, or other cards that can provide you stamina. If you're somebody that's been hurting for stamina, this Tenka doesn't actually do anything for you. She's a real strong support, but she's kinda picky in what she actually wants to work with. Her support skills are Idol's Bond, Promise Recovery, Rest Boost. She also happens to have Dance Mastery SP reaching +10 at level 75. Unit Mastery SP reaching +12 at level 80, Dance Mastery Dance Limit Up reaching +6 at level 80, and Excellent Boost which reaches +10 at level 75. Her support appeal does scale, starting at a 3.0 dance appeal at the beginning, becoming a dance 3.1 with a mental 3% heal at level 60, and upgrading eventually to a dance 3.5 with a mental 15% heal at level 80. Her TFD idea is vocal, her insight token for grad is visual, and her proficiencies and landing point are vocal and dance. Tenka's 0-star appeal is a dance 2.5 that raises your dance by 10% for 3 turns and applies a mental 2% heal. Her 1-star passive has a dance 50% up and mental 5% heal as long as it's turn 3 or earlier, has a 20% chance to activate twice, and also unlocks a mental plus 50 uncap. Her 2-star passive, a dance 130% up if your total heal count is 5 or higher, has a 20% chance to activate twice. Her 3-star uncap is a dance plus 100, and her 4-star appeal is a dance 3.5, raising your dance by 30% for 3 turns, and applies a mental 5% heal. Tenka gets an S+. Tenka has a lot of potential for a handful of setups. Ideally, Dance Alstroemeria is the best fit for her kit, when you consider her 2-star passive and lack of strong stamina options when not ran next to other Alstro supports. I feel that the 130% buff is enough to make people consider making some kind of shift in terms of their support setup for other teams outside of Alstroemeria, but it remains to be seen as of yet. If you don't believe in it and aren't running Alstroemeria, you can maybe safely skip this card. I hope that I am not accidentally jinxing it and Tenka becomes one of the best supports in the game. If she does, oops. I moderately to highly recommend pulling for this Tenka. Lastly, we have Meguru. The next in line for our Grade Fest supports is Meguru, featuring Chiyoko and Mamimi in the story, if that matters for you. She's the visual equivalent of the Kiriko Nichika support from a little while back, which means that she has a lot of positives going for people that want to get a little more serious about grinding know-how for step. We have no confirmation if you can stack Meguru and Kiriko's know-how mastery, but it should be strong if you can do so. Maybe something to experiment for players that are willing to purchase as many copies as they can. Her passives are a little strict, but we don't need to focus on that specifically because we mostly care about the know-how mastery in this case. Her support skills are Idol's Bond, Room Mastery, and Trouble Guard. She has Visual Mastery SP reaching plus 14 at level 75, Visual Mastery Visual Limit reaching plus 3 at level 70, and Know-How Mastery reaching plus 3 at level 80. Her support appeal does scale, starting at a Visual 3.0, working its way up to a 3.1 at level 60, to a 3.5 at level 80. Her TFD idea is Visual, her Insight token for grad is Dance, and her proficiencies and landing point are in Dance and Visual. Meguru's 1-star passive is a Visual 20% up that requires you to be in the visual position, which has a 30% chance to activate once, and also unlocks a Visual plus 30 uncap. Her 2-star passive, a Visual 45% up that requires the turn count to be 3 or later, has a 30% chance to activate once. Her 3-star appeal is a Visual 2.8 that raises your vocal dance and visual by 20% for 3 turns, and also unlocks a Visual plus 50 uncap. Her 4-star passive is a Visual 60% up that requires 1 each of a vocal dance and visual active buff. This has a 30% chance to activate once. Her event passive, a Visual 30% up, requiring the turn count to be 2 or later, and it has a 20% chance to activate twice. Meguru gets an A. Again, this Meguru should fit in perfectly for players that want to gather more know-how for use in step, just like Kiriko before her. Her 4-star passive is, again, a little strict, as per the rules of Illumine, but outside of this, she's a perfectly serviceable support that potentially has high payoff for those that are willing to put in the time and effort for grinding know-how. She's a great mix of story and usability for most players. And I highly recommend farming Grade Fest as much as you can each season to get as many copies of Meguru as possible. And that will do it for the video today. Thank you so much, as always, for watching. I know this month has been a little light. One of those was intended to be a video, but then circumstances that be kind of made that not work out. And then some of the other banners just haven't been that super compelling to feel, I don't know, interested to talk about them. I know that feels bad, considering all the last couple years, but just, it feels a little better for me, and I hope that you're not too stressed about things that I'm not talking about per se. What is fun though is that if you are a member of the Shiny Colors English Discord, we're kind of doing a pilot run of the whole new forum setup, and we've been using that as an opportunity to essentially do text versions of the Shiny review over there as well. And that's a pretty good place for people to kind of come in and give their own thoughts on cards as well. So if you're somebody that's in the server or haven't joined the server, I recommend it. It's a pretty decent time. You can go in there and talk about the cards as well, or even just see the insight of other players to see what they feel about the cards and if you think it's worth it for you. The videos don't always come out timely, so maybe that's something if you just want that little extra something. Anyway, that, again, will do it. Thank you so much, as always, for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and next time we'll talk about whatever banner comes next. Till then, I've been Cho. Again, thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day.